Look at this neckline. There's an asymmetric yoke here on the top, a smaller one there. I've played with stripes, and there's this really lovely keyhole detail. This piece is lined. I've got 3 of these amazing garments to share, a top and 2 dresses. So excited, stay with me. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and I have some neat sewing to share with you today. And it's a pattern that's really different, and I really enjoy that because I don't like sewing the same thing all the time. And I've definitely never sewn a style like this in a knit garment, which was really fun. And what I'm talking about is the Brisbane top and dress from Itch to Stitch. You know, the patterns are always named after places, and Brisbane just gives me a big smile because I spent many happy summers over there when I was very little. As some of you might know, I lived in Australia when I was very young, in the 80s. Way back then in the previous century. We lived in Sydney back then, but we did go to Brisbane quite a few times, and it was so beautiful. The beaches, the weather, everything was so nice. So Brisbane does actually make me smile. The Brisbane can be a top or dress. It is actually in the same pattern piece, so it's very uncomplicated to choose what to do. You just cut on the cut line if you want to make a top. The only difference is that it's longer. It goes straight down from the hips. Otherwise, all the special details are here on the neckline. You have a bit of a scoop neckline, but it's a bit higher actually. It's not going to choke you, but it is going to hit the clavicles right there. And then you have 2 types of yokes. They are asymmetric. One is larger and goes across from one shoulder to the other. That is the top yoke. And then you have a separate smaller yoke here, and it creates a little bit of an inverted triangle there. I love that. And then underneath you have a front piece that has a little opening here. It's a very, very modest keyhole. You're not going to show anything at all. It's quite small and quite high. No chance of you showing any cleavage at all. And in the pattern test, I saw all the pictures. Absolutely no one was showing more than a little bit of skin here on the upper chest. So I think that's really nice because it's a beautiful, beautiful detail, but you don't need to be worried about, you know. All this neckline area on the front is fully lined, which means that inside all the seams are enclosed. Both these diagonal seams and also the shoulder seams. So neat, so beautiful inside. It is a fitted design, comes in at the waist, and you have short sleeves. The typical short sleeve. There's nothing really different or exciting about the sleeves. Everything exciting is in this area. I've got 3 to share. I was just gonna make 2, but I had to make the 3rd one just to get it out of my system. I've chosen 2 of my most precious knit fabrics that I've been hoarding for years. That just tells you how much I liked it. But I did make a top as a muslin, and I made a cheeky one actually. I made it sleeveless just because it was a small piece and I wanted to check all the fit and the techniques here for this area. You need knit fabric, and it does need to be more medium weight. I wouldn't go lightweight at all. Don't try rayon spandex or ITY. It is a fitted design. It'll cling to you. But also all the sewing techniques here just won't hold up. It just won't really work that well if your fabric is really sloppy and really drapey. So medium weights are best. I've used 2 types of athletic knits. One is a little heavier than the other, and the 3rd type of fabric I've chosen is a sort of a mystery knit, stretch crepe, polyester type of fabric. Beautiful print. This is a heavier athletic knit. It has stripes and other types of designs on the print. Some flowers. So nice. It's so soft, and it's got the perfect structure for this design. I was also going to be able to play with the stripe direction here with the yokes. And this is the 3rd type of fabric. I don't know the composition. You can see this one stretches much less. I did measure it at 30%, perfectly fine. It's just at the minimum required. You need a small piece of lighter knit fabric for the lining piece. There is a small lining piece up here. So it doesn't need to be a color that matches your main fabric, because if you move, you might be able to see a little peak. So you could use power net, you could use nylon, tricot. I used actually a heavier ITY for mine, and it worked really, really well. You also need some really lightweight stay tape because there are certain areas that you need to stabilize. I've never had that type of notion, so I just make my own. I cut strips of interfacing, non-stretch, on the straight of grain, and I cut them 3/8 wide, really long strips, and that's what I use, and I get really great results. The important thing is that whatever you use has to be featherweight, like the lightest lightweight stuff you have, because anything heavy is not going to work out. It's going to turn out bulky. Because the Brisbane is a new pattern from Itch to Stitch, it's 20% off for the first week. I'll leave you my affiliate link down below so you can purchase it through there if you like the style. When you purchase through my affiliate link, I make a small commission. I do have to disclose that in every single video. I wouldn't recommend if I wasn't absolutely in love with the product and the brand, and I am. You know, I've been sewing Itch to Stitch since 2017, so it's quite a while now, and the quality is always amazing. I just can't stop saying that because it is the absolute truth. If I get enough time to write the blog post that I want to, because I want to have all those pictures in there so you can see, I will also link that down below. If I can't get it done in time, maybe you want to check back later or just go to my website and see, because I might have a blog post maybe a day or two later than I post the video, because it takes quite a while to make them, you know. Don't forget to check all my links in the description box. Sizing available from 00 to 30 US, and there is a regular bust option, and that'll work for an A, B, C and sewing cup size from 0 to 3 inches difference between the high bust and the full bust. And then you have a full bust option that you can use if you have 3 inches or more. So you see that the number 3 there is sort of borderline, so you could choose. I'm right there, and because I've sewn all the other patterns from Itch to Stitch with the full bust and I've had a great result, I just stick to the full bust option. I think it fits amazing. It doesn't really give you that much extra ease at the waist and hips either, so I think it just really fits me, and it's the best option for me. Other pattern brands that have a full bust option, usually it's got too much ease for me, so I just stick with the regular bust. But every pattern brand will have their own type of drafting, and I know Itch to Stitch so well, so I stick with full bust here, and it's amazing. It's so good. This is a pretty fitted design, and so at the bust you have pretty much 0 ease. If you really want to be nitpicky, there's a 1/4 inch of positive ease, at least for my size, using the 12 full bust option. A 1/4 inch of positive ease means no ease, which means the garment is going to be the same circumference as your body. And that is how it should be. That I think those are the designs that fit better on the upper chest, the shoulders. It's going to fit really well. And that is the reason that you have fabric that stretches all that amount, you know. And at the waist you have a bit more ease, 2 to 3 inches of ease at the waist, so it's not really skin tight at the waist. And then at the hips you have about 3/4 of an inch, a little less than an inch of ease, which is perfect. I like fitted designs like this to have that amount of ease. I can even cope with 0 ease at the hips if needed, but this is perfect. Love it. On the pattern pieces front and back, you have multiple shorten and lengthen lines, which I think is really good. So I'm pretty short-waisted, and I know empirically I need to shorten bodices most of the time. So I shortened the bodice, or the top area of the top, by 1/2 inch above the waist, but then I added 1/2 inch back on below there. I'm just redistributing length in the pattern. I end up with the same length, but it's just shorter, the notch here a little bit higher because I'm really short-waisted. And my top, I made it 1 inch longer than the original just because I'm a little bit taller. I just did that at the hem, no drama there. But then for the dress, it was going to be super short on me. There is a shorten and lengthen line way below the hip line at the skirt area. I added a whopping 3 inches there to get the dress to be above my knee. Otherwise, it would have been a mini dress for me. So just be aware. I mean, I know I'm taller than the standard. I'm not that tall either. I'm only 5'8". But just be aware if you're tall. Just make sure you measure. You do have finished length measurements in the finished measurements chart. So you know exactly how long the top is and how long the dress is going to be. Compare that against what you like or what works for you, and you won't have an issue there. Let's hop into the sewing. I hope you can see how doable this is, although it does look like it's several steps. I promise you, once I'd sewn my first one, my second and third came together so fast. The result inside is amazing, and we're going to see all the techniques here to put this neckline together, all the good stuff. Let's see.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me? You've been rated down like hell. I'm weak.
What I'm doing to some of the pieces, I'll just illustrate with this one. This is a front facing for the yoke that you'll see later on. I've just cut strips of interfacing. On the straight of grain, no stretch here, very lightweight. So the idea is for this not to be bulky, and we need to stabilize this area. So on the front yoke pieces, you'll find little areas that need stabilizing. This one needs to happen all the way along this bottom edge. When you fuse it on, don't fuse it on right at the edge. Move it in a little bit to make sure that when you sew at 3/8, you are going to have interfacing right there. And this is white, and my piece is a clear color, so when you see me sewing, you'll probably not see these pieces that are there, and they will end up making a big difference into how the neckline looks, preventing it from getting stretched out of shape. So because this is white and pretty see-through, the little marks I made with my pen are still visible there underneath. There are notches there and a dot right there, and I can see them perfectly. Now the bottom of this facing piece is stabilized. I'll show you in a second all the pattern pieces and what other little bits need to be stabilized like this. These are the pieces for the Brisbane top. I'm only missing the sleeves here on the screen. This is the back, it's cut on the fold. The front is also cut on the fold, and you can see that here you have a funny shape. This is a keyhole neckline there, but you can see there's a straighter edge, and that's because the upper section of the front is going to be finished by 2 yoke pieces, and those are those pieces right there. I'm going to show you those up closer. This that you see here by itself is the lining of the yoke. It's just one piece. That one there is made out of 2 pieces, and right there on the top we have 2 little neck bands. Those are going to finish the back here and this little keyhole there. Okay, here we can see the yoke pieces. The important thing to note about these is that you need to cut these with the fabric right sides up and the pattern pieces right sides up. They are asymmetric, so you need to get that right. So basically you would have your pretty fabric looking up at you, and then you put your pattern pieces on top. This is the upper yoke, this is the lower yoke. They are going to be united there, and the lining is just one piece. You're going to have a bit of a triangle shape. Here we can see the 2 yoke pieces flipped to the wrong side. Here you can see the neckline, a strip of interfacing, very lightweight, cut on the straight of grain. I just molded that to the curve right there. Here is a dot in the middle. From this dot to that notch right there, you need to fuse a little bit of interfacing there. So that is on the wider part of that top yoke. Over here, there's no interfacing. There is a notch here that is going to match the notch of the bottom yoke right here. And this dot on this area is going to match that dot there. From this dot outwards, this way, you also find the notch, and that is also interfaced. You can see the interfacing up closer. I am interfacing with white. This is the top of the main front piece. This is where the lower keyhole opening will be, and that was also stabilized with a strip of interfacing right there. Here we have the upper yoke. You can see it's got this slanted shape right there. Make sure you have the fabric facing you just as you're looking down, right sides up. And now take the second piece. Take your second piece. Now have it looking like this, wrong sides up, interfaced section looking up like this, and at the bottom you have a section that's not interfaced. So this is how this goes on right there. Looks very strange, but it'll make sense in the end. There you can see the dot. This dot, just put a pin through it and make sure it comes out on the other side where the dot is also. So the dot is right there. That needs to match. So what we're sewing is from this edge up to that dot exactly, not through the dot, not past it, just right up to the dot. You will have a notch that will match the one on the other side. I just mark mine on the very edge. I don't cut into the fabric, and you can see it's got this shape there that's going to match also. So this is just a straight stitch on your sewing machine. You cannot do any of the steps of the neckline with the serger directly. It just won't work. Make sure you stop right at the dot there. I have my pin right on it. Okay, so this yoke will be treated as one piece now. This seam that we've just sewn there needs to be pressed up towards the larger part of the yoke. When we look at it like this is how this is going to look. You have that seam diagonally there, and it forms that triangle. On this lining piece, we also have a dot in the center there and 2 notches there, and what we need to do now is match the lining to the yoke piece, right sides together like we have it here. And I'm just going to work on it from this side so I can see. Remember, on this main yoke we have the seam allowance pointing up. I'm going to match that dot to the dot here of the lining because they need to match. And when we sew these together, we're going to sew them in 2 sections. We're going to match this notch on the main yoke to the notch on the lining piece that's underneath. We need to sew from that dot to that notch mark, but not through the seam allowance. We need to leave the seam allowance free, so that's why we're going to do it in 2 sections. First this one, then I'm going to move the seam allowance out of the way and then sew from that dot to there. So I'm going to let my needle fall exactly on the dot mark right there. It's very easy to see with this white fabric. And then sew right up to here where that notch is. Now we can move the seam allowance out of the way. I'm just going to push it down. I can still see my dot right there. So I'm going to put a pin through that dot, make sure it comes out on the other side exactly on the same place. And now I'm going to sew from that notch right up to that dot. Remember, we need to always have the seam allowance free. Don't catch it when you sew. This is all with 3/8 seam allowance. Okay, so that is what we can see. It's been sewn in 2 sections right up to the dot. Seam allowance is completely free. From this side where we have the lining, we're going to snip right into that circle. When we extend these, we're going to have the lining on the left and the main yoke on the right. We're going to push the seam allowance underneath the lining right there and understitch close to the edge. From here, being careful there where we just snipped and along there. And we're just going to understitch also right here on the edge. From the wrong side, I'm just going to trim this down. This is after doing the understitching. Okay, after finishing that, we still have both the yoke pieces right sides together there. I have the main yoke on top and the lining on the bottom, and I've just pinned them here on the neckline. The main yoke has the stabilizing interfacing, the lining doesn't, so that's why it's better to sew it with the interface side on top, because you know your presser foot is not going to stretch that out as you sew, and the feed dogs will keep this in check underneath without it stretching out also. So we'll just sew that together at 3/8 seam allowance, just being careful with the curve to keep it nice and even. When you're sewing the curve, remember to just go slowly and move the fabric as you go, following the curve. Don't stretch it out to be straight. Okay, now we're going to trim this down a little bit. I'm going to do a few snips and then we're going to understitch. Okay, so that's how that looks. Before we understitch, we need to flip this to the right side, of course. And this yoke is looking a little strange, but it's still not finished. Now to understitch, I'm going to open it like this. I'm going to have the lining on my left hand, the main yoke on my right hand, the seam allowance tucked in under the lining. And I'm going to understitch, but not from the very edge. Just leave about 5/8 of an inch without understitching. And when you get in here, you're not going to have good access, so you won't be able to sew all the way through. Always keeping the seam allowance underneath the facing. Okay, I can't go further right there. Now on this side, I'll be doing it on the opposite side. So I'll have the lining on my right hand, the main on my left, but still the seam allowance is always underneath the lining. There's about 1.5 inches here right in the center that didn't get understitched. I just don't have the access with the sewing machine. That's to be expected. I'm going to go and press it and give it a good cleanup. It's going to look much better once it's all pressed. What we have here is the front and the back neckline of the main pieces, the large pieces. They all have a curve on the top. The front neckline has been stabilized with interfacing, as you can see there, but the back neckline does not have interfacing. We had small neckband pieces. The front one is shorter than the back one. All I've done is fold the neckband pieces in half lengthwise, wrong sides together, as you can see, and I've just pinned them along the edge. And now we're just going to sew these together at 3/8 seam allowance, and then we do the same thing that we do with every single binding piece. We trim it, we snip, we understitch, we flip it to the inside, and then we top stitch it down. It's always the same thing. My snipper is needing a replacement. It's lost its sharpness a little bit. Now we push the seam allowance all underneath the binding and we sew right there on the edge, and that's how we understitch. So it's the same for the front and the back neckline. I've got the main front or back here on my right hand and the binding on the left. Seam allowance has been trimmed and snipped and is underneath the binding. And I'm going to use my blind hem presser foot to understitch really neatly without thinking too much about it. I want to reduce the bulk here, and you can see that I had trimmed the seam allowance before, but I think I can trim it even further, closer to the understitching here, to make sure it's not seen behind the binding. And because this is really fast and easy, I'm just going to give it a quick hand base so I don't have to deal with pins on the curve. So I'm just folding the binding to the inside here and just giving it some big stitches to hold it down. This is how that looks on the inside, and on the outside it looks really neat. Okay, now comes the fun part when we put the front yoke together with the front. This neckline, we've just done that. This is all finished and pressed. Now the great thing about having 2 layers in the yoke here is that we can enclose this seam here, this diagonal section on the front. It's going to go in between these two and it's going to be super neat inside. All you need to do now is open these 2 layers like this, flip it a little bit so you can see the wrong side partially, like this, so you have your main and your lining. That's the right sides together of the fabric. Now take this and butt it against that edge right there and put it in between these 2 layers here and there. Now pin it carefully, match the edges here on the side, and then we're just going to sew it, and that will enclose that side, and then we repeat on the other side. I have my front piece in the middle there, sandwiched between the 2 layers of the yoke, right up to that seam there, and I've just pinned it all the way to the edge. Now you're going to have this shape here on the edge. We're meeting at the seam allowance, so you're going to have this like little dog ear right here from the yoke, but once we flip it, it'll all be good. Just make sure all the raw edges match. There's 3 layers here, and we're just going to sew it together. This is where the magic happens. When you flip this, the seam is coming from inside both yoke layers. If you flip it this way, look how neat that is. Super pretty. Now on this edge, this is going to be the armhole. This is where you're going to sew in your sleeve later. So that was super simple to do. Now we do it the same on the other side. Just take your yoke pieces, open them up, flip them a little to the wrong side so we can have good access right there. Scoot this front piece right up to there where we have that seam matching all the raw edges. And the same thing, just align all the edges, sew it, flip it, and it'll all be done. Look how beautiful this looks inside. It's so neat, it's so pretty, it'll be super comfortable. The seam here is fully enclosed, very neat, so understitched. The lining is not going to be seen. And on this other side, it's super neat also. I love it. Now the concept to attach this to the back is the same. We're going to be opening up these 2 layers of the shoulder seams right here and just sandwiching the back in between. The exact same thing of what we've done. So take your back neckline and align it to the main yoke, right sides together as you can see there. Make sure the edge of the neckline of the back meets that seam, and then take that lining piece and wrap it over so that you have your back shoulder between the 2 shoulder areas of the yoke. I'm going to do that on both sides, so I'm going to pin that, and then take this other side, right sides together, align the edge of the neckline with the seam, open these 2 layers up, wrap this around this way, and pin it. Okay, so this looks a little bit twisted, but it's fine. The shoulder seams are just enclosed inside the 2 layers from the yoke. This is where the neckline is, and you have a little bit of bulk in there. Just make sure that is right against the edge. That's why we don't have understitching all the way also. So we're going to sew that one, and I've got the same thing happening over here. On this side, I'll be sewing from the armhole towards the neckline. Okay, now this is flipped. We can see the front yoke here has the 2 layers. The back is coming from inside like this from the back. It's very neat. Shoulder seams are enclosed. Everything's enclosed on both sides. So from the inside, it looks like this. The front yoke just covers up all the seams, everything. Neckline coming from in there, the same as over here. So all of these steps are worth it to have a really neat finish like this. Now basically you would set your sleeve in on the flat if you want to, or sew your side seams and then sew your sleeve on the round. It's up to you. This is my first Brisbane top. It's so lovely. This is actually a more vibrant green than I think you can see. I think my eyes see it better than the camera can. It usually seems to be the case. And there's black and beige. This is the one I used to make the tutorial for you. It was a great fabric for filming because the wrong side is quite visible. I was sewing with green, so you could really see what I was sewing. So I'm glad I chose it, and it was such a tiny, tiny piece. I knew I always wanted to make a sleeveless version because I usually do. So this is a sleeveless armhole, which is not the original armhole. If you like to make sleeveless things, don't assume you can just leave the sleeve off and finish it, bind it or whatever, and it's going to be amazing. It's usually not. It's usually going to be too wide. You probably have some gaping here at the bottom on the front because there is supposed to be a sleeve there. It's drafted for that. So I always try it on and fiddle. I always shorten it here in the front. In the front, it's probably an inch shorter here on the bottom of the armhole while keeping the back the same, and that usually solves it. Once I'm happy with how everything's looking, I measure that and then I'll calculate my binding. I've used a type of binding that is really clean. It's got a stitch in the ditch system. There's no top stitching and it's been flipped to the inside. So I always really like how that turned out. Little keyhole, not much to see right there, just a little bit of skin, but it's perfect. I have a twin needle hem. I've made it an inch longer than the original because I needed that extra length. I thought it was going to be a little bit too short. There you can see the binding on the back. It's so neat. I love that. And that little neckline at the bottom of the keyhole is also finished in the same way. You've seen how the inside looks. It's so neat. That lining piece encloses these diagonal seams and the shoulder seams. So pretty. I think it's so top-notch. The sewing is amazing. It's how I would want to wear a top like this. If I had raw seams rubbing against there, I think it would be super uncomfortable. So this is amazing. Not only does it finish it properly, but it's also super nice to wear. Love it. I'm showing you the inside of this one so I don't show you the inside of the dresses because they are all the same. You can see how the binding comes from within that seam there. So because this is a fitted top and a little shorter, I've styled it with some really wide pants and some heels. It's quite a dramatic look. I would go to a wedding like this. I would go to church like this. I would not go to the supermarket like this or the mall. But I like to dress up and there's not many chances to do that. So if I can do it for you, I love it, so let's see. This is my first Brisbane top from Itch to Stitch. This was actually a muslin. The original version does not have a sleeveless option, but this is sleeveless. I just modified the armhole a little bit. But I wanted to test the fit and practice all the construction techniques on the neckline. This is a top. Mine is 1 inch longer than the original. It is a fitted design, so you want fabric that is not too clingy. This is a medium weight athletic knit, and here is a look at this beautiful keyhole neckline. It's so beautiful. There's 2 yokes here on the top, and it makes a little triangle shape, and then there's a rounded neckline on the bottom. So pretty. The lining inside means all the seams are enclosed. Really love that. Really happy with this. After sewing this muslin, I was super excited to make my final dress versions that you'll see next. Such a unique design. I really enjoyed sewing it because it was really different. This is my second dress. I love it so much. Now, I've had this piece of fabric since probably 2018. I bought quite a large amount of it because I love the print so much, and I've already made a bomber jacket with the same fabric before. It was just sitting there waiting for something special. I always knew it was going to be some type of fitted dress because I didn't have that much either. So I made this dress, and just to highlight the features and to not just have print all over, I did the bottom yoke in black. This is a really heavy athletic knit. It's the type I use to make leggings with. So it's really heavy, it's opaque, it's really structured, which is something that I needed to have over here on this area. And it matches the weight of the main fabric right there. So I love it. By doing things like that, even though it's a print, I think you can still really see the features. The top yoke comes over there, the bottom yoke right there, and then the little keyhole. I do have the sleeves in this version. I didn't make any changes to the sleeves. The sleeves have a regular length. They fit really well. I have a really good shoulder fit right there. And the rest is just like the top, just longer. The twin needle hem always works really well for me. I really like that. Now I had to add 3 inches to the length, as I mentioned. It would have been a really short dress if I hadn't have lengthened it. And it's just amazing. This is the heaviest fabric, I think, out of all of them. And it just hangs so beautifully. This design doesn't need to drape, but this one does have a type of drape that's nice to look at. And it's just amazing. It's got all the colors I love. I just can't stop smiling when I look at this. It's so pretty. I mean, maybe you think it's horrendous, but it's totally my style. And I know I'm going to wear this a lot and feel amazing. For this one, I used a black ITY as a lining inside. It's just as neat as all the others. Everything's enclosed. It's just that I've used black. All the understitching keeps everything inside very neatly. I just love the finish and really enjoyed sewing. And after sewing the first version, where I actually learned the technique and filmed it step by step, I absorbed it. I memorized it basically because that's what my brain does with sewing. I can go ahead and sew a second version in like an hour. I'm not kidding you. It came together so quickly the second time. I didn't even notice when I was like hemming it and finishing it. It was so fast. So simple styling, just some little red sandals with a wedge. Love them. Let's see. This is one of the Brisbane dresses I made from Itch to Stitch. This is a size 12, full bust to 14, waist 16 hips. I love this fabric. This print is amazing. It's a stretch crepe. I really love the print and I've been saving it for something special. And I love fitted designs like this. I did add 3 inches at the hips to have the length reach above the knee. I love how it goes in at the waist. It's just really nice, and it's the style of dress I feel the best in. I decided to color block and use black for one of the yoke pieces just to highlight it against the print. I think it looks really different, and that's the best thing about sewing, that you can do details like that. At the back, the fit is normal, the piece is cut on the fold, and here's a closer look at this keyhole. It's really flat. It is actually quite modest. You're not showing anything at all. And I'm really happy with how the sleeves fit and the shoulders. Really comfortable dress, but also super stunning. I really love it. I just can't stop smiling with this neckline. It's so pretty, and I know I'm gonna enjoy wearing this one a whole lot. You can see me just twirling around in my backyard. Very enjoyable, and I knew I had to choose another print to get another dress off my system. I really wanted another dress after making this one because I just feel amazing in this style. I've saved the best for last. Now this is another fabric I'd been hoarding. I bought quite a nice amount of yardage back in 2018, and I'd used a tiny little piece to make a pencil skirt already, so you might have seen this skirt around. As well as with the other fabric, I had just enough to make a dress. And I'm so happy because this one has stripes and flowers and other types of prints in there, and I could really play with the stripes, and I've saved it for last. It's my absolute favorite, and I'm just so happy to have it. I sneak peeked a little bit in the introduction of the video, and it's so amazing. Black and white, it's an athletic knit. It's also medium to heavy weight, and you can see the direction of the stripes is different, which highlights the features of the yoke right there. Keyhole. And then when you look at it, you have these splotches of print with black and flowers and stripes and black and white. A type of dark red and purple, I don't know. I just find it's amazing. And because my fabric had the same type of stretch vertically and horizontally, I was able to cut the sleeves on the cross grain. But, you know, knits don't have a grain. I just cut it in the other way to get this detail of the sleeves like this, horizontally. Because as you can see, it is more of a vertical feature on this side, and I wanted it like that on the sleeves. Made sure to cut them the same so I would have the same type of print there, and I love it. The back looks like that, and on the side seam I was careful to match this type of print on the side seam there. So on this side we have this sort of geometrical type of print, and on this other side seam we have the stripes. And they magically match. I didn't plan to make them match, but they did. So that's a bonus. I did the stripes there going this way with a bit of flowers intentionally, same as the flowers there. I tried to have that make sense a little bit. I didn't want to have the black print around here. So everything I cut out was intentional. It did take me quite a while to sew and to plan and see how I really wanted it to look. It came out just exactly like I wanted it to look, and I'm so happy. Simple styling as always, just some little heels, silver heels this time. I think they just match and they look amazing. So let's see. This is the second Brisbane dress I made, each to stitch, the same sizing I made before, 12 full bust, 14 waist, 16 hips. And this is a fabric I've been holding for a long time. It's got stripes and flowers all in one. It's so lovely and it feels amazing on. You'll see the details up close up. I was able to play with the stripes a little bit. Fit is amazing. It is the preferred style that I like to wear, also because it doesn't take up that much fabric. I feel the best in this type of style. Here you can see the yoke pieces. I was able to play with stripe direction to highlight those features, and I think it looks really nice. Nothing interesting with the sleeves, but they do fit really well. And the important thing about this pattern is this beautiful neckline. Fits really well everywhere, and I'm really happy with it. Here is a closer look. All this neckline area is lined partially, so all the seams inside are enclosed, which makes it really comfortable to wear. There are no raw seams rubbing against your upper chest or anything like that. I'm just ecstatic with this make. It's just so different, so unique. The sewing is very different also, not what you expect, and you just slow down and you have a beautiful result, and I'm super happy with mine. Remember, the Brisbane top is on sale for the first week. I always leave you my affiliate links down below in the description box, all the information you need to know. So if you like it and you plan to get it, please use my affiliate link. That really helps me out a lot. I hope this was fun to see. I am just ecstatic with my dresses. I can't swipe the smile off my face. I know I'm going to wear these tans. I love the colors. I love everything about them. They're so pretty. So pretty. And I mean, yeah, I love the top as well. The top is so nice. So different. And I love the fabric. So yeah, I'm just so happy to share because I just love my make so much. I hope that comes across because I am actually pretty happy with these. I'll see you again very soon. We're adding a few more details to sewing woven collars for shirts, which is really fun. So we'll hop back into woven sewing in the next one. I'll see you there. Don't forget to subscribe, all those things. It really helps the channel grow and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Bye.